the meeting to be uploaded later on onto the website. And with past meetings, with COVID regulations, we are sitting socially distanced and we're wearing our masks, and we'll only take them off when we're speaking so that we can be heard on the recording. All right, we'll start with agenda approval. Can I get a motion, please? Oh, are there any changes? Let me start that, forgive me. Are there any changes to the agenda that anyone knows of? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Motion by Forsberg.
Second.
Second by Easter. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to some future events, please check the district website for a complete list of monthly events. Our next meeting, and this is actually a quick change, will be Tuesday, September 29th. We'll have our school board work session at 6 p.m. Thank you to everybody for your flexibility on that. And then we have on Tuesday, October 6, 2020, will be our next school board regular meeting at 7 p.m. with 6:45 communication to the board and the administration. Moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Wheaton,
Second.
second by Strobel. To approve the following items of the consent agenda. Minutes of the August 10th school board regular meeting and August 25th school board work session. Bills paid for July 2020 in amounts totaling $3,957,384 and personnel items that were distributed previously. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Moving on, presentation, special guests, and recognition. Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Association of School Business Offices International. I don't know if we're doing a formal presentation on this tonight, but it's definitely worth noting that Spring Lake Park School District 16 is a multiple year recipient of this award, most recently for its comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019. Definitely a tribute to the amazing work done in our business services office. Is Amy here? There she is. Headed by Amy. Do you want to say a little bit about this, Amy? Or Sarah?
I can quick, just, I think that you mentioned, I think this is the 14th year in a row that we've received this award. It really is a testament to the work that Chris McGee does to get ready for this. He is the person in charge of pretty much running the audit and keeping me on task to get my parts done. It is something that we just feel it steps towards a transparency, because what the certificate represents is that we have filed a comprehensive annual financial report, different than the minimum requirements as set by the state of Minnesota. So in doing that, there's just a lot more statistical tables and analysis that we do to prepare that. I would have loved to have had Chris here, because it really is mostly his work that goes into this, and it does take months to get it ready. So he wasn't able to be here tonight, but just to make sure that the board is aware, we'll continue to apply for that. Our audit actually for the fiscal year end 2020 starts next week. So hopefully we'll have that wrapped up in the next month or so.
We share our appreciation. Congratulations. All right, moving on to discussion reports and information items. Number 1, engaged enthusiastic learners align work with adults to continuously improve personalized instruction and responsiveness to meet our students' unique and varied needs. Update on fall 2020 start of school, fiscal year 21 district operational plan. Dr. Jeff Donovan and Dr. Oakland.
All right, good evening, everyone. And we have now had our four first days of school. So as we started out, kind of each day has been a new day. So Thursday will be our second day of school, really, as a system, which will be nice to get to as we've transitioned into this. The last couple of times we've been together, we've given you a lot of reports about what our plans that we're implementing with a heavy emphasis on the health and safety plans, and then also getting into some of the teaching and learning. What we just want to talk about today is kind of how we really got to the point, what the learning looks like in the classrooms, and just these first couple of days, and kind of highlight that, because we haven't been able to get into as much of that. So this is going to be more like what have the professionals been doing to get ready for these first couple of days, and then what's that look like with kids as we've gotten rolling. Before I go into that, I just want to, like any other year, this year's required the work of tons of people to get started. Normally, and every other year at the kickoff, I always think, everybody remind people that yes, schools stay open during the summer. When I get asked, so what do you do all summer? And I'm like, well, multi-million-dollar organization like ours does not just shut down for the summer. And, and I thank our technology staff and custodians and all the teachers who are here throughout the summer and many others for getting ready. Well, this year it was that times 100. So I just want to first thank my cabinet team for all of their work to have these 4 first days of school go so well. So Hope Run, Tony Meyer, Mayor, Erica Tyvo, Amy Schultz, Colleen Peterson, and Ryan Stromberg, thank you to each and every one of them. They've been instrumental in their varying roles, working with families, with students, with teachers, district leaders, custodians, food service staff, transportation, etc. All of them, because there's not a single aspect of our school district that's not working differently this fall than they have in previous falls. Every one of them looks different operationally in how we're working with families and the community and students than it ever has before. And that doesn't happen with the snap of a finger. So I can't thank my cabinet team for the work that they've done with all of those people. In addition to that, I want to thank our principals and innovative and personalized learning specialists and other members of the school leadership teams, and Melissa Olson, who you'll hear from in a little bit here, for how they've really embraced this challenge as an opportunity. Okay? I think there's a lot of systems that have just said, well, we're going to keep doing the things the way we've done them in the past, but just for a different number of hours or a different number of days. And we've really taken this, and but with their lead, taken this opportunity to say, how can we advance our vision in personalized learning? And they've really taken that to heart. And I think this approach that we've taken in both extended flexible learning and with modified campus has really capitalized on the creativity of our staff, and those core components of personalized learning to really put students at the center of learning. So rather than just putting something in place just to have school, it's been really about how can we, even with all of the constraints that we face and the challenges we face, how can we improve upon what we did, not just last spring when we had the challenging environment, but what we did last fall. And I think the learning that we're doing with kids this fall has really improved from what we were even doing last fall before these constraints were in place. Now, have there been bumps those first 4 days? Of course there's been bumps. But people are really taking those on. So I want to thank all of those people, and then also I want to thank our nearly 900 staff who have really embraced this, and they've seen the possibilities and said, how can we move that forward rather than seeing the challenges. I think of our middle school staff, our high school staff, our elementary staff, our teachers who are really developing their own schedules rather than waiting for somebody to tell them what to do. They've really taken this on and said, okay, as professionals, how can we really meet the needs of kids? It's been so gratifying to see that work. So I just wanted to, before we jump into anything else, take time to thank them. And the other thing that I think has also been unique in our system compared to many others is our families. It's been amazing to see the responses, the understanding, questions. It's been great. So I just want to take the time to thank all those people because we wouldn't be where we're at today, 4 days in, if it wasn't for the work of all those different folks. So that's kind of where I wanted to start. Move on to this next slide. So what we've begun this year, as you know, with 2 responsive learning model that we looked at from the state, and we started with our modified campus, or what the state is called a hybrid model. You may remember the last time we talked, it was at that point just over 65% of the students at that point had signed up to be in a modified campus model. That's now increased to 69. It was actually just under 65% that I selected that then, to now 69%, over 69%. So it's been a 5% increase in the last couple of weeks. We did try to cut that off just for staffing, so this is made for a lot of work in the last couple of weeks to really be responsive to those requests of families. So for example, we heard a lot of requests, for example, that, okay, well, I filled out the survey, I thought I signed up for the modified campus model, and that you can tell that because I signed up for transportation. I wouldn't have signed up for transportation if I would have signed up for distance learning. Well, we looked at that, so there was some confusion with that, so we worked with those families to make this happen best that we could. And again, that's a big thanks to our principals, Hope, Erica, and everybody else who could respond to these folks so that we could do that. But so we're up to, you can see, nearly 4,300 students who are in that modified campus model. And then we have 31% of our students, nearly 2,000 students, who are involved with full-time distance learning at this time. And we'll talk more about each one of those models and how the students are experiencing that in a little bit. As you know, we're following that Minnesota State Learning Plan, so each week we look at that 14-day case rate. You can see it's been pretty consistent. It has dropped, so we're essentially been right at 19 though, either within just above 19, just below 19, and it can change dramatically. So at this point, we don't see making any changes in the near future. We need to continue to just do what we're doing really, really well, but we'll continue to monitor this and update you as we do so. So I'll move on to the next one. As you know, what we won't do is take you through 30 slides like we did the last presentation about health and safety. But if, as I walked around the schools last week to double check and all of these things that are in place, huge thanks to Tony and Becca for their work with this, and Doug Stahl and others. It's pretty amazing to see as you go around the schools to see all these things in place. So you cannot travel a hallway and not see signage about which side of the hall you should be on, etc. For our students. It's pretty clear. Here's some examples of what you see as you go around the school with washing hands. Every space in the school has a maximum occupancy for that space that you can have and meet social distancing. So very thoughtful approach, tons of work went into that. So a huge thank you to everybody for their work with that. So, move on to the next one. This is just another view. You can see it's pretty consistent. The number of students that are in the modified campus or the extended flexible learning by grade. So across the system, they're all within just a couple of percentage points of one another. So this is the number of students. So you see some variation there, which is more about the size of that class than it is about the percentage. But it's a pretty similar percentage across the board. There's not any grade levels that have a really unique number of students involved. So you can see with that last bullet there, over the last week, there have been many family requests to shift, and we've done our best to be able to, at the last minute, do that, but still be able to make sure teachers can get their roster to be able to be prepared for that first day. So how did we get here? And I'm going to hand this over to Hope and Melissa in a moment, but as you know, back in June, we developed a real approach to this planning way back in June, and we walked you through that and how we use our decision-making model that we use in the system, where we use a process where we have some people involved in the design team that are really closely involved with that design, but then we get input from a whole bunch of people so that we can capitalize on their ideas. So we had over 50 teachers that engaged as an input team, planning for all three scenarios and giving us all kinds of ideas that we should look at. And then we had a smaller design team, which ended up being, I can't remember what was, about 30 people probably, about 10 people per. We had elementary, Westwood High School team that came in for multiple days, and then worked from that input team, put designs together, and then what they did, then that came back to, that input team was invited back in, and they were able to get feedback on, now that you've taken our ideas and you put these designs in place, they were able to give some feedback about how could we improve that even more. And then that continued to be, those initial prototypes were modified throughout the summer, all the way through the end of August as we learned more about student needs. So, but we were able to put those out in early August to parents with the plans, and then just continued making adjustments based on students and their needs throughout. So we had we also then brought our teachers back. We had 6 days this year instead of 4 at the end of August, where we really worked with our teachers with really extensive professional learning to prepare them to have a successful start to the year. So that's where I'm going to hand it off to Hope and let her speak to that.
Sure, thanks. So I just want to share a lot of appreciation for the extended time that we had for professional learning as we started this school year. This, we'll get into this in a little bit more detail, but this gives you a comprehensive list of learning that we did with our teachers over those 6 days. I also want to call out, we had 2 days of new staff welcome for our new teaching staff prior to workshop week, and then we had the 6 full days for all teaching staff. As we go through the next few slides, what you'll see on the bottom is a connection between our district operational plan project and our workshop week professional learning. And that's intentional, as our focus, as you all know, throughout all of our design and planning for fall 2020 has been grounded in our vision for the future and our strategic anchors. So as you'll see as we go through each chunk of professional learning that we did, the connection to our district operational plan projects. So I'm going to start, and then I'll transition it to, as you all know Dr. Melissa Olson, our district lead for learning and innovation, and between the two of us, we'll share those highlights with you. All right, so if we go to the next slide, I'm going to start with new staff welcome, which again was the week before workshop week, and we had 2 days with our new teaching staff, August 26th and 27th. We kicked this off in the high school Fine Arts Center, where we spent time with our new staff on our SLP vision and values, the why and what of innovative and personalized learning, along with our 4 core components, and of course, a great message from Dr. Ronberg. After a socially distanced box lunch with our new teachers, they were then grouped together to have breakout sessions on the following topics you'll see here. So our learning models, both modified campus and extended flexible learning, our learning technology platforms, that's one thing we needed to get people up and running with right away, was either Seesaw or Schoology, and our standard digital toolkit. Strategies to build student relationships and support classroom management, again, within either learning model. Student services and special education supports, and strategies to support our emerging multilingual learners. Again, all of that in either model. So we did a rotation of breakout sessions that afternoon, and then the following day, teachers went to their assigned buildings and worked with their principals and other school leadership team members. And I just wanted to share one quote. As you know, every time we offer professional learning, we engage in, you've heard me talk about Tom Guskey's 5 levels of professional learning evaluation. And that very first level is just to get teacher perception data. And so we do that fairly immediately after that professional learning happens. And so you'll see a few quotes in the presentation from that teacher perception data. So here was one of our new teachers who said, "I appreciated the welcome session on Wednesday and getting to sit near and connect with staff from my building. I also appreciated dedicated time at my building." And it was nice to hear that because we really try to take a purposeful approach to those 2 days of new staff welcome. We need to strike a balance between the times that we spend learning together, the times we spend having our new staff make connections and build relationships with each other and the existing staff that are coming to join us for those days. And then finally having time at their building to get that personalized orientation to their school and their classrooms. So again, it's nice to get some feedback on that. From new staff welcome, we walked into workshop week, and I'm going to pass it off to Melissa.
So I'm going to just walk you through a little bit of what we covered during workshop week, and again, just emphasizing what Hope had shared and how we connected that to our district operational plan. So during the extended week of professional learning, we revisited the importance of the why and the what and how of our learner profiles and our short-term learner maps for personalized learning. This also aligned really well with our teachers preparing for meet and greets, both in extended flexible learning and in our modified campus, so that they could start thinking about who are my learners in front of me right now at the beginning of the year. And so they had an immediate application for that learning. It also, of course, we want them to be thinking about how this guides the design of upcoming units to personalize that learning. And then engaging in communication and making connections with families. And of course, personalizing the approach that's needed for meeting students' academic needs. We encourage them to use those learner profiles, and not only during meet and greet, but in these first days of school to develop relationship-centered activities and really get to know their students. The other piece that we really focused on during workshop week with the teachers is just emphasizing that student-owned learner profile and learner map. And so in some of our buildings as well, we started the process of having teachers think about an educator profile and using that for them to connect, how they can think about that as a learner, and then who am I as a teacher, and then connecting that to the learner profiles. So we're excited to take that even further. So this, as Hope mentioned, came from one of the evaluations at one of our sites about the workshop week. I appreciated the time and opportunity to look at learner profiles. I was able to use some of that information as I met my students on WebEx to help me make some early connections with my students, which is exactly what we wanted. So that was great to see teachers using those right away to start the year. And of course, building on them as we get into the year. So this slide has a lot of big ideas and pieces of our district operational plan in it. And as Dr. Ronenberg mentioned earlier, we really tried to seize this opportunity to look at how we could move that vision even more forward than we have. So when we thought about competency-based learning and how we wanted to bring that to our teachers during professional learning during workshop week, we provided an overview of the competency-based learning through the lens of prior learning we've done. Now, some teachers have had more extensive through the cohort, innovation cohort with the competency-based learning, but all of our teachers in our system have had experience with Schlechty's authentic engagement. Thinking, if you're not familiar with Schlechty's authentic engagement, which I'm sure you've heard about here before, but thinking from that student perspective, where is that persistence going to come in with learning, and how do we engage our learners so that they see the relevance and the value of the learning and are willing to commit their time to that learning. So we revisited that during our workshop week, and then we also revisited the work of Heidi Hayes-Jacobs and Cut, Keep, Create, along with Depth of Knowledge by Norman Webb. And so to illustrate that connection a little bit, when we think about depth of knowledge level 1 being recall, I can identify or recall some information, and that depth of knowledge 2 being a limited application of what it is that I've learned. 3 and 4 is where it gets really rich when we think about strategic thinking and then extended thinking in level 4. And what we really asked our teachers to do was take that learning of depth of knowledge and Schlechty's engagement and then look at their units that they have and use that as the lens for what do we cut, what do we keep, and what do we need to create, because it either needs higher levels of DOK or it needs more engagement for students. And so that was really the way in which we wanted them to connect the learning. And we also tried to really couch that in our professional learning for where do we as teachers want to spend the bulk of our time and what is the role of the teacher, especially in our modified campus and our extended flexible learning. When you only have the students in front of you for a certain amount of time, we want our teachers focusing their time on that DOK, depth of knowledge levels 3 and 4, and the facilitation of that strategic and extended thinking. That doesn't mean that those levels 1 and 2 aren't equally important because they're foundational concepts, but those are pieces that students can access a little bit more on their own. And so we spent quite a bit of time thinking about that in the vein of our learning models, and what does depth of knowledge mean when we think about it in our learning models. And then if you look to the right side here, we also wanted our teachers to immediately apply this learning to the design of those first units. So what are the learning outcomes and how do those align to our competencies? You know, that bridge of we're moving more and more into our competencies, so what does that mean as we're looking at the learning outcomes that we currently have? Thinking about how we might develop more authentic, relevant performance assessments, and then authentically applying and transferring learning across disciplines to the real world. And I think one of the really neat things as I was experiencing workshop week and at different sites and popping in on different WebExes and listening to our teachers and seeing what they're sharing is just seeing all these pieces come to life. And I just wanted to share a couple of examples that might illustrate how some of this work comes to life. So at the kindergarten level, they shared across sites how they took a social studies unit and updated the questions to a higher level depth of knowledge and could use that even with picture books. So sometimes there's a myth that younger children can't access those higher levels of depth of knowledge, and our kindergarten team shared how they have really changed the way that they ask questions to reach those higher levels. And then we also have some really neat things happening in the math department at the high school where they're thinking about some of those transferring across disciplines. So they're working on some ideas where they can look at how math can be tied to physical education and building nutrition and workout plans where there's correlations and complex decisions based on fitness goals, social sciences, looking at math in the news, identifying numbers in the media and looking at country or world issues through the lens of mathematics, and even through history, creating a mathematical history of the topics covered in the current trimester. And so just getting our teachers to think about how they can create those interdisciplinary connections for our students. So it was just, like I said, it was really enjoyable to listen in and to also hear one of the other myths that we talked about a lot during workshop week is that all students can work at depth of knowledge 3 and 4. And often that's how we engage them and hook them into the learning. And dispelling that myth that we have to start with 1 and 2, and instead, how do we really engage the relevance, and then we can use that to help them reach those other foundational pieces that they might still need. So this is another quote that was shared during workshop week. It helps me to see examples of questions and then rating them by what DOK we think they are. Seeing examples and discussing it with my teammates is helpful. So one of the learning pieces they did at several of the sites was looking at a unit and looking at questions and having the teachers discuss, do you think this is a depth of knowledge 3, or would this be 4, or is this 2, or how might you take this and make a 2, a 3, and then immediately going to work on their own units to apply that. And so, again, that was really great to see in action. The other thing that we worked on during workshop week is the trimester overviews, which were also created last spring. You can see up here, the teachers developed those trimester overviews for their courses. First of all, to provide all stakeholders a big picture view of learning. And by all stakeholders, first and foremost, the students, and then families, and then teachers, but also teachers who are collaborating across, or our student services teams, who are really wanting to make sure that all students have the supports that they need. And those trimester overviews really provide a quick glance at what's the big picture of the trimester, the learning outcomes. What are some of those key summative and formative assessments that we can expect to happen during the trimester? And then what are those key communication points with families? And so they provide a framework or a skeleton for our teachers to look at the trimester as a whole and then develop more comprehensive units from there. But the other thing that we really emphasized with our teachers is that the trimester overviews are designed to be a living, breathing document that you personalize for your students in front of you. And so that you're updating it real time for families, you're updating it real time as you see where your students are at with their learning and make the decisions about how to progress and move forward with that. So we had, besides all of that, we had additional professional learning that was focused on our teacher guidance document, which I know that you have seen and looked at and that we've shared with our teachers, which explains our modified and campus extended flexible learning models. We also revisited emerging multilingual learners' language needs and how to address those needs in both learning models. And then, of course, technology, learning platforms, and standard digital toolkit of our apps. And then, of course, teachers taking that and thinking about how do we make sure our students can access that. So there were some fun things that came out of that. Then our extended flexible learning with Schoology scavenger hunts for our 3rd and 4th graders to start learning how to use maybe a new LMS, moving from Seesaw to Schoology. And then our collaborative delivery model for student services and special education. Again, how that's delivered in both our extended flexible learning and in our modified campus. And then, of course, our health and safety training. It was a very powerful 2 weeks of workshop week. And I think that one of the things that we are most excited about is how we will continue to cascade that professional learning that we started during workshop week throughout the year to continue our work in all of these areas that align to the district operational plan. So I'm going to turn it back over to Hope.
All right, so we're just going to transition a little bit into what learning looks like. And as you all remember well, at our last work session, I think we spent close to about 90 minutes going through the 2 learning models and all of the components, so in quite great detail, and then as well getting your consultation on which aspects of the model were most important potentially to share with our families. And since then, our communications team took all of those notes and worked together to frame up those 1-page overviews of each learning model. You can just see screenshots of them here by grade levels. So tonight we'll just give a quick overview. We won't go into a 90-minute detail for those learning models, but we do want to remind our families and community members that the one-page documents are available on our website. There's a link at the bottom of the slide, but really you can just go to springlakeparkschools.org and follow the links to Plan 2020 and find them accessible to you there. So for this first in Modified Campus, as you can see, we have a photo there. Learning is in full swing, regardless of model. When we think about what learning looks like for students in our Modified Campus learning model, students are in the classrooms, physically distanced, or physically distanced learning spaces at school. In this picture, I believe is a group of kindergartners or first graders. One of kindergarten, thanks. I think it was your picture. Yes, thank you. Here, and so, you know, we have right around 15 students in a learning space. Our kindergarten and first graders are in each day. They've been in, our kindergartners have been in since last Thursday. And we built over, like Jeff said, 4 first days here. And so we're ready to keep on keeping on. Our 2nd through 12th graders in the Modified Campus have each had at least 1 day of learning at school and at least a day of learning at home. And just a reminder for those students, for grades 2 through 6, our elementary students, their learning at school looks largely like what it would look like engaging with teachers and peers in collaborative work and learning when they're at school. At home, for our 2nd through 6th graders, 2 of those days at home, they're engaging in interactive learning with their teachers, and then on those Wednesdays, they're doing primarily asynchronous, or what we call that on-demand learning, using their learning platform, either Seesaw or Schoology, to access those materials. If we move on to extended flexible learning, again, the one-page documents that go into much more detail with the description of that, but you can see here, some of our teachers took our top 10 tips for learning at home. This is Mrs. Marscal, one of our extended flexible learning teachers at the kindergarten level, set up her own learning space as she's teaching here. And then we just have a screenshot too of one of our elementary teachers working on reading in an extended flexible learning format. So just kids are engaging throughout the day in those live sessions, and that might look like WebEx. At the older levels, that might look like Schoology Conference. It might look like using some of our apps that allow kids and teachers to engage real time. So as we've started, a lot of that has definitely been video-based as we're getting to know kids, and we want to make sure we get that FaceTime with them. And we'll keep evolving into many hows for how we engage kids in live synchronous learning.
Before we hand it over to Eric here, it was a lot of fun last week just to get around Thursday and Friday to see kindergarten. Because I was curious, how's this going to feel to our kindergartners? This is totally different than past years, first day of kindergarten. But there was the same excitement that kindergartners have every year. It was pretty cool. One of my favorites was I walked into one of the kindergarten classrooms on Park Terrace, and I got 1 foot in the door, and this little boy yells out at me, I'm making! And I said, what are you making? I'm making! So he just kept telling me that he was making his name, but he was so excited about it. And then at Woodcrest, and I was walking through there, and there's a little boy that was jumping up and down, and he's saying something to me in Spanish, and I was with John Frankie, and I said to him, that was pretty good, he's already speaking Spanish. And John says, well, no, he's trying though. So, but he was really excited to be trying to speak Spanish, so it was pretty cute. So, but it was a lot of fun, because that excitement was, even though it looked different, that excitement was still there. So.
I can verify that as a parent of a kindergartner who just started at Woodcrest, that she was asked, do I get to go back again this week? And I said, yes, you do. And she was very excited. So she had a wonderful first one.
Great. Good evening. On an excellent, normal, regular day, we can gain insight and take action to improve communication. And there is nothing like a pandemic to highlight your many opportunities to do so on a very quick timeline. I just wanted to revisit just a few of the things we learned in the spring about communication and connection. And we were able in the spring to take some real-time actions and adjustments. And then gratefully over the summer have a little bit of more breathing space to really consider how we move forward and how we continue to make progress. So I condensed it into 5 things, I like a list, 5 things we learned this spring. Starting with our staff, because really our staff is the most critical communications vehicle we have. And we learned that staff haven't always had information that they need to answer family questions before families have information. And so how could we think about that and work differently with that? Also feedback that they receive many one-off messages and they're difficult to track, as I'm sure we can all relate to. So we're very fortunate because our staff very much want and need to be in the know. The second thing we learned is that families want to rely on our school communications because your relationship is really at that building level with your student. But their experiences haven't always been consistent, or you can't always find the information you're expecting. Or if you have kids in 2 different schools, there may appear or feel like there's some conflict or misalignment. 3, school newsletters have been difficult for all parties. For those producing them, those receiving them, how we navigate that, and haven't always been the most approachable or user-friendly. And that's visually clicking through to stuff, the mechanics of it, as well as not really having a clear strategy or tool that allows us to provide translation. 4, communication from teachers improved significantly in the spring for many families during extended flexible learning. And many reports that many families had heard, this is the most they'd heard from teachers in a long time, and it was really welcome. And in so many ways, that is the most important connection point that we have. And then finally, something that I know as a board we've talked about before, last winter before this all happened, is that there are so many systems. And we have a lot of technology systems and tools, and given the reality of our context, we need all those systems and tools. But information and access to them is kind of all over the place. So we are working on aligning, and it's very actively working on. So starting with our leader and staff communications, we have begun to package, if you will, and consolidate information in a leader digest for our principals and for our district leaders. We're doing that twice per week right now on Mondays and Wednesdays. So they get one communication that has things that they need to do, need to know, and then or things we're asking them to share with staff. And then that leads to staff being updated on Tuesdays and Thursdays with those critical information that kind of combines that whatever the district nuggets are as well as that local information. So they're getting that all in one place, and that also has been providing us opportunities to get information to our staff before it goes to families. And from a parent and family communication perspective, schools are continuing to provide important information in their school newsletters on Wednesdays. We're working to operate differently in how we align around those messages and really engaging our principals and admin assistants at the buildings who do the vast majority of this work in some conversations together around what are the topics you're hearing about? What are the things we should be covering? Do we have all the information? Is it accurate? So really having some intentional conversations about that. We also are working with a new template that provides us really easy language translation, just with a click of a button. At least it's a Google Translate style of translation. And then we're working to make these more readable and not less clicking, more visually appealing, and I think that'll be a work in progress as we go through the year. And early reports are that the process feels better to people because we have intentionality around the messaging. We're getting things to people a little bit earlier. It's less angst and putting it together. And our goal was really to improve it for everyone involved. Classroom communication you already reviewed expectations within the guidance document and really communicating what that experience should look like. for a family from the classroom. We really are working to build on the positive feedback from the spring and also making that a really consistent experience for all students and families. And then finally, we're working through reimagining the twice a month Parent Connections email newsletter that has gone out for the last couple of years on two different Thursdays to district families. And thinking through, if you're getting that need-to-know information at the school building level, how can we really use the Parent Connections district-wide communication to really share those great stories about the SLP experience across the continuum of grade levels and schools. And then finally, yep,
Can we go back to that last slide quick?
sure.
So one of the things that just at the core of this, we've talked a lot in the past about design thinking and how we really, that's all about putting the user or the customer at the core and at the center of our design, planning, decision making, right? And I think this is really an evidence of that. And we saw this last spring, starting with even just viewing our staff as those internal customers and what's their experience. And you know, that in one day is we really started thinking about this as we transitioned to extended flexible learning last spring when COVID hit. And it's like, if you were a teacher, you maybe got an email from Judy Cahoon, you know, first thing in the morning, and then one maybe came across from Hope, and then maybe one of Hope's staff, and then Ryan Stromberg, or Ryan's, you know, then they get another one from Judy or Judy's assistant. Pretty soon they're trying to keep track of all these messages that are separate messages. So we've really discouraged all of those one-off emails so that the teachers largely are getting these 2 messages a week now. And if they get one-off emails, they know they're important, that they couldn't wait. So for example, Judy Cahoon was asking us last Friday, hey, here's some things I really need teachers to see before Monday. Can we get those off? And we said, yep, that makes sense. So the teachers would know, okay, that's what I have to pay attention to because it's not one of 25, it's still one. And I think that it sounds like something that's really simple, but it's not. It's really changing dramatically how people work. And it was even today looking at that the digest, one of our principals had a number of things that she wanted to put out there to the teachers. Said, okay, do they really need to hear all of these things yet? What do we need to talk about to make sure all of the principals are on the same page before we put that out at one school? And it's the kind of thing that maybe in the past, a real well-intentioned message would have created some misunderstandings that now it's like, okay, let's put a pause. Not all of that. Teachers don't need all of that now. Let them focus on this. So thank you to Erica, who's really bird dogging that with Hope, and the 2 of them are really taking the lead on that. But I think it's making a dramatic difference for not the staff, but then also for families downstream.
And then one final comment on all the systems. There are still a lot of systems. We continue to have a lot of technology tools and systems that we need for a variety of things, whether that's paying fees, getting assignments and sharing learning, tracking your bus, conferencing tools. There's a huge long list. But what we have tried to do in working with Hope's team and Jeremy on Hope's team as well is try to get all of the learning and teaching stuff and all of those more like operational technologies, at least all the information about them and access to them into one spot on the website, which can be found under the parent menu. And it's technology tools, resources, and logins. And that includes the login links, the information, really amazing tutorials on how to set things up. And we're continuing to evolve that as a place that families can go to. And just this week, and actually in tomorrow's newsletter, we're working too with the technology team and understanding like what are the big things that have been coming in this week, and how can we like really highlight for parents tomorrow. Like you can find this here, and this is how you do this. And so I think as the weeks go on here, we can pull those themes out and really highlight pieces of this technology toolkit.
I also just want to mention, I had a parent who had like 3 years ago forgot their Schoology login, password, so they just haven't done it. I'm like, okay. So let me help. So I went on the website. What I really wanted to compliment you guys on was not only can you find all these things, but there was a page where there were like 3 different places where I just sent him like a screenshot. Like there's like 3 places on here for you to contact somebody for help with this. Like you don't have to look that hard. And there, you could email, you could call, which I really appreciate because when parents get in that moment, they sort of freeze and they need help. And having lots of avenues to follow someone's really helpful.
Great.
Okay, so that brings to, I started this presentation in the evening here with, this is all about how do we advance our vision, how do we advance our work. So we looked at this district operational plan last June on our one page, and normally at that time we would give you all of the milestones and everything else. One of the things that spoke with cabinet about that we're going to be doing in the coming weeks now is revisiting this and saying, okay, so where are we at with these, and now let's look through the rest of the year and what do we want to accomplish? Is there something we need to add? Because we were really focused on that top one of ensuring learning through this pandemic, of getting to this point. But as we did it, you can see all of these other projects that we worked on in advancing that work as well. So as Hope and Melissa walked through, we really focused on those core components of innovative and personalized learning. And I saw all kinds of evidence through that professional learning and hearing and talking to teachers as I walked around the schools or just emails that they sent, how much they appreciated that. And it really influenced their design and their plan for the coming week. We also looked at the English language arts curriculum implementation. There's been a lot of work done with that this summer. The Fighting Student Learning Environment was part of the professional learning last week, using that data warehouse and dashboard. And that we'll be doing even more with that. School improvement innovation planning we'll be doing later this week, and next week even more with our principals. But that was, they had probably their school leadership teams and their learning and equity teams in more this summer than they've had any other summer, working on those plans, not just for the fall, but like I know at the high school, everything they were doing as they were prepping for last week, school, last Thursday and Friday of this week was all about how they were advancing projects that related to this district operational plan. And then obviously you just heard about what we were doing with communications. We didn't talk to you at all tonight about Metro Heights study, the preschool for kindergarten readiness or community education study, and we'll do those more. We'll talk about those more in upcoming meetings. So with that, I just want to go on. Now this is the fun part, and I'll let the pictures speak more for themselves. So this is kind of like giving you the superintendent's report already, because normal years in the superintendent's report after the first day of school, I'll share kind of the start of the year in pictures, and it just fits better right with this presentation. So you just heard about what it should look like. So, but the school year has begun. You can see the kids' smiling eyes in most of these pictures. You can see a few smiling.
I have to just say, I love this tweet from Tyler Nelson that says,
I do too.
staff are so excited that they're waiting for students in the
Yeah, it's,
window.
I
look
love
close, you
that.
can see Scott Ecker in the window. So, yeah. Okay, go on here. I love this. Some came skipping, some were a little scared. You can see Mike Callahan was helping one of our kindergartners along, but the student on the left needed no help at all. She wanted to go. Been so many smiles in these first days of school. Kyle Fritzy, one of our teachers, she said one of the nicest messages to us about the work, how much she appreciated all the support she had kicking off the year. See these kiddos. Some more. Just let it be up there for a moment so you can see them all. Kids were excited to get back into school. I heard that from kids repeatedly. Some of our kids that were maybe at home, the parents that shared the pictures. So extended flexible learning students. Let's see. It's a big mask right there in the middle.
He has a Batman mask on above his mask.
And then this was a great message we received from one of our parents. They started off the presentation by saying how appreciative I was of our parents. I love this message from this parent. Just let you read that. So it's getting messages like that occasionally that really help you out. And this was, Erica said we have to wrap up with this picture. One of our kindergartners. So thank you again to everyone, and thank you to the school board for your support, your help in adjusting the calendars and everything else to do that. We felt nothing but your support throughout all this, and never could have made this happen without your leadership and your support. So thank you to each of you. Any questions?
Yeah, questions, comments, John?
A couple things. First of all, thanks for including the thing in the district operational plan. and all the bullets that we've hit. I mean, it just points out again how important and how accurate the choices that we've made to focus on are when a pandemic happens like this. And those are the things we have to focus on to make things work, right? So it just circles the wagons for me and says we're doing the right things, we're focusing on the right things. The other one is, I know the start of the school year, not every district's had the same experience. There's been some rocky starts. So because of you and your team, the staff, all around the district, just, it's incredible. So, thank you.
Thanks, Trent. Thank you.
I almost feel like we should clap or something. Oh my God.
You guys must feel the speech since sort of leave. I mean, there's so much work ahead, but like, it went so well. Amazing. Anything else? Questions, comments? Michael,
I'll let you go.
I got a question from a parent just this afternoon, actually, and I said I would ask it. Has there been, I mean, I think one of the things we're going to struggle with, with the distance learning of the hybrid model is how much time on the off days, the distance days. And so this parent said, I think they have a 4th grader and a 2nd grader. So my 4th grader, this was their first day of, they're in the hybrid, this was their first day of distance, and my 4th grader was done in 30 minutes. My 2nd grader was done in an hour. Is that just because it's the first day? Has that been intentional, or they just wanted to know about that?
Yeah, no, great question. And I mean, in our guidance document on those, for grades 2 through 6, on those interactive learning at home days, we talk about, let's think about a full school day and what that looks and sounds like. Also knowing that we don't want kids on video conferencing for 7 straight hours with no breaks to move or get some lunch or things like that too, right? And so I would, like, as we are starting this week, those interactive learning at home days are largely right now around getting to know the kids, doing some of those initial kind of relationship building activities, and then maybe just some initial looking at where are we at with some of our biggest learning targets or learning outcomes right now. And so I would imagine that if that was one individual situation, as we get through the first couple days here, that will increase for that interactive learning. Now, again, we're not going for 7 hours straight of WebEx on those days by any means, but definitely more connections throughout the day, both synchronously and asynchronously on those days.
The one thing that I remind myself, that is the newest part to this year, is that days. I mean, teachers are used to having kids in front of them in person, so those days, that's more normal. The teachers who are teaching extended flexible learning have done that, and they knew what they needed to improve on. This at-home day and having that connect to what's happening on the day they're here is the newest part of this. So there'll be a growing phase, probably a little bit of growing phase with that. And the one thing I'd ask, if any of you get questions, is just encourage those parents. It's like what Erica talked about with that communication. The most important person for them to contact is the teacher. So if they feel like, hey, my kid only got this done in 60 minutes, what's this going to look like in the future? What are your goals? That'd be the best place to start. And if for whatever reason, if their answer there is, that's what we have the principals and the innovative and personalized learning specialists at the schools that can work with you as well. So I just don't want parents they should never hesitate to ask those questions and ask for help. So that's what we want to do, is build that connection and make sure we're answering those questions.
Especially with all new.
Yeah.
Then I have one more. I think, this one's for you, Melissa. I'll admit I'm not familiar with Norman Webb's depth of knowledge, so you mentioned something about the kindergarten example about changing questions to reach higher levels of DOK, and I'm just really struggling conceptualizing that. And I don't know, maybe a specific example would help me, but I'm thinking an experienced kindergarten teacher should have a pretty good idea of what the depth of knowledge of kindergartners are. So how does that look to And I know there is a limit to the depth of knowledge of kindergartners, having 3 of them myself. I'm just having trouble conceptualizing that.
So conceptualizing the questions that they asked.
Well, how you change the questions or the curriculum to
Yeah.
reach steps 3 and 4, which I don't know what those are, but.
Yeah, so it's taking something that might be like would have previously been a who and a what and a where and a when for a story, which are still important for kids to understand, and taking it to the next level of a student making an association with what that might mean for them personally or to the world around them, to like that higher level of maybe synthesis or application. And so the revisions, I don't think that they did they still are including those who, what, where, when, but they also then added some pieces to looking at those books. A picture book about, I think one of the questions that they used was around the idea of fairness. Because kindergartners feel really strong about fairness generally, not sometimes. And so they asked the kindergartners a question about fairness that was related to the book, but that they could also then have discussions about that concept besides just the book. So that's just an example that they had used in the unit design. Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of, what John was saying earlier, I agree 100% on what the district and everyone has done. But I also wanted to just say thank you to the teachers for being flexible with this. Because this is a new adventure for all of us, and I just appreciate them wanting to be flexible and go along this journey with us and being cooperative. So thank you to them. And then I have a question around communications, and maybe it's more of a statement. I understand that the communications between the teachers and the parents has improved since we've been in the pandemic, which is actually one of the things that I think we were trying to do through conferences. So I'm kind of curious as how that would impact conferences if we have conferences this year. Are we expecting conferences to be much better as far as communication between teachers and parents, and then if so, how do we carry that forward?
Hope you look like you.
Sure, yeah, well, I'll start, and then you can add to it. But, so with Wednesdays, throughout the models, both learning models and the grade levels, having time dedicated to that family communication. And if you remember, when we went through both learning models, that whole, I guess it was the far right column for the document you had, was all around the communication and those points of communication. I think our end goal is for that to be happening real time, frequently. Like, remember we had here's what you could expect daily, here's what you will expect weekly, and then here's what's ongoing. So that those conferences that happen at 2 points in time throughout the year, there may be less of a need for that. I think in our past structures, because maybe we weren't doing that daily, weekly, ongoing, maybe that looked and sounded differently, that those points in time became really, really important to get okay, in the last 9 weeks of learning, tell me everything in this 20-minute conference about my child and their learning, both social, emotionally, and academically. So right at this moment, we haven't formally said they are or they aren't happening. I think we need to play out what this looks like over the first few weeks. We also know that there is still value in providing opportunities for those moments in time, face-to-face connections. So I think, again, as we play out and we learn from it, we'll hopefully get to a good both and with that. But
Comment on that. If we are going to get rid of them, I would suggest we got to let parents know sooner rather than later, because a lot of parents they may not be as engaged with these periodic
because they're waiting
because
for
they're
that one
waiting for
moment
that
in time.
parent-teacher comments. That's what they're used to.
Sure.
So if there's any thought of going away from that, I think.
Yeah, I would say that we'd be looking at just formally going away with them. What we'd probably be doing though is looking at differently. For example, last week of school last year, where we gave that option, where we had the conferences where the parents met with the teachers. we had our teachers heard from a lot of parents that I don't really have anything to add because I've been talking to you kind of weekly and shared a lot, or they were very brief meetings. They didn't need to do that. So we may still do the conferences, but some of that will be driven by the parents and if they feel the need to. What we want to, as we've talked about in the past, eventually get to, is that those conferences should be more on demand when families need them, and they should feel like they can ask for those conferences when they need them, rather than waiting and hoping that that's magically the right time to talk to the teacher in October or February. So we'll still keep those on the day, the calendar, but as we get to that, we'll look at who do the teachers know they really need to connect with, and so we can use that, and who are the parents that want to do that. But then if parents are feeling like, hey, no, I've had that, I've talked to you plenty, we don't need to take the time to do that. It's not something that people should feel like they have to because they've traditionally done it. Our hope is that there's a lot that feel like they don't need to.
We also know that, given what the public health scenario looks and sounds like in mid-October, arena-style conferences where 1,000 people can walk into the school. I mean, so regardless, keeping those, we will have to adjust what that looks and sounds like, regardless.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say the on-demand thing works well for assertive parents, but I'm not talking about assertive parents. I'm talking about parents that are maybe reluctant or not as assertive going to the teacher, requesting those things. They have, for those parents, it'd be nice to have a set time. So it's there for them to
I think we're saying the same thing. So that those options will be there, but my hope is what we want to get to long term is because the parents are reaching out and getting that, so those parents that are reluctant feel invited to do that earlier rather than waiting until October. We want to there's a lot of our families that I would say, unfortunately, have maybe felt disinvited from schools in the past, and whether that was their experience as a student themselves, their experience at another school, or within one teacher, and so they are hesitant to do that. So how do we bridge that early? And that's what Erica was speaking to, is like, that's what we want to create, so when I said that's the goal, but we're not gonna realize that perfectly by October of 2020.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll make some progress towards that though.
And if I can just add to that, I have to say, I agree with you, Michael, because I definitely have many times in the past liked having that opportunity. You're a few weeks in, it's kind of this formal opportunity. But I also have to say, with a child who had a 504 plan, is that their 504?
Yeah.
I'm saying that right? I would have loved the opportunity to more informally been able to reach out earlier, because by the time I'm in October, you're quite a ways in. I don't even know if that teacher knows, and kind of tracking. So it's really nice to have those opportunities as well, just depending on your kids' needs.
So I think it's right now, it's the idea, it's the vote.
Yeah,
So how do we do the
absolutely.
vote? And then we'll do that, because, some parents also do it. I know I was that parent often, like, well, if I'm a good parent, I go to conferences. Although there's probably nothing I'm really gonna learn at this point, right? So how do we make sure that parents don't feel like they have to do that because they feel really important? They say, no, I don't really have any questions because I talked to you last week. So we'll see how that works. The one thing to wrap up one person that I forgot to thank, and so we mentioned that in John, there's been some districts that have had a little bit bumpier starts, and some of that with their employee groups. And we obviously had a lot of teachers and staff who've had a lot of questions about health and safety concerns. And they've asked those questions, and Ryan and Krista have answered those questions, and it's been great. And they should ask those questions. But as Ryan shared with some of his colleagues across the metro area, we actually had to hire EFL teachers because whereas other districts, we're looking at, we don't have enough teachers to work in person. We didn't have enough teachers to work online. So that's where we were putting some of our new teachers, because our current teachers were willing to work in the schools with kids, which was great. But one of the people and all of our employee groups were really great to work with, but Kathy Stallnaker, I don't think there can be a better union president in the state of Minnesota. And I want the teachers who may be listening to this or watch to know that that's not because Kathy was just doing what Jeff or Ryan said. She was a constant presence and advocate for teachers throughout the entire summer. But as she did that, she partnered with us. And how do we make sure the teachers feel heard and feel that we're doing a safe environment? And how do we create a great learning environment for kids? Kathy, she's one of the most creative teachers we have at the high school in the district. But she really she embraced that paradox of how do we meet staff needs and student needs. And I think in a lot of systems, that's something that sometimes union leaders struggled with, of forgetting, you know, it would all maybe be focused one way too much. And Kathy's she was a really strong advocate, always looking at the staff needs, and how do we at the same time make sure we're meeting student needs. She was awesome. And I don't think we'd have to kick off to the year without the leadership that she provided. And I think that's something important to say, because I do think it's unique, and I think it's a long time of really working on building that relationship. And not just Kathy with her leaders within each school have done a great job with supporting their colleagues and answering their questions. So I just think that's important to say as well.
Tony, did you have anything else?
No, that was, thank you.
Sarah?
I know we're wrapping this section up, but I really feel strongly to say this. I think that what Michael brought up is probably going to be an issue with the whole expectation of how many live meetings there are. When my daughter came home, she's in 8th grade, yesterday, she said, hey, guess what? I don't have any live meetings on the days I'm at home. And I was like, well, no, of course you do. She's like, no, I don't have any. And I said, oh, that's not what I meant. I understood, but okay. And I just kind of thought, she's not right. That's fine. It was the first day yesterday. It was a big day. And then I started getting phone calls. We would try to go for a walk last night. I got stopped by 3 people in our neighborhood. And then I got another phone call last night. Like, what is this about? And I was like, really confused myself. So I just called Tom this morning and I said, can you just explain? When you have a minute, I left a message. I said, don't call me till you're free. But can you just explain what's going on the 7-8 side? Because I think I got so many calls last night. I think people are confused. And I guess I read through the paperwork too, but I still am confused. And he said, yeah, I think, you know, maybe that's a misconception, but there aren't going to be any live meetings for 7-8, but they should have asynchronous meetings on those days. And I said, I think there's going to be some phone calls. So I understand what you're saying about the communications, not wanting to be, I can totally appreciate getting 1 email instead of 25. But I do think that that's going to be a misconception with some parents on the 7-8 side, because I also have a 5th grader, and she had 4 meetings today, which I was so happy with, because she was like so excited to see her teacher. She like held the dog. She was like sitting in front of the computer, hoping that someone would comment on the dog, I think. But she was so happy that she got to see her teacher so many times today, and her face live. And then she had 2 asynchronous meetings that she watched. She was just as equally as happy with those. And the other one's like, sitting there watching all this go on, like, I don't have anything to do today. So I hope that that was just this beginning, like, we're getting rolling, that she didn't have anything to do today. But I do think that at some point, Tom made a really good comment this morning. He said, let me look up under school, do you see what you're looking at? And he goes, okay, I see what you're saying. He said, but I think we're rolling here, it's just the beginning. But he said, do you feel like if a teacher came on, took a video of themselves explaining an assignment, because in this older age, we're expecting to not have to walk them hold their hands through all of the assignments, but maybe like explain in a video, here's what the assignment looks like, here's the instructions. And I said, I think that's awesome. I think my child would be really happy to see a teacher explain it versus just read it, you know? And so he said, I think the expectation, because I said, how many times should she expect to see? She has like 7 teachers. How many times should she expect to see each one of their faces on those days off? And he said, well, certainly not every day. And I said, well, that's what we got last spring. Like, she saw almost every teacher every day that we were home. It was quite impressive. But they were just maybe just awesome and kind of like went above and beyond, you know? And maybe that's not what it is, but I just wanted to agree with him that, I don't know how many phone calls, if you said you got 1, I think I talked to 7 people in like the last 12 hours of like, why isn't my kid?
So, yep, and that's the split between K-6 and 7-12.
Yeah.
So that's grades 2 through, well, K-1 is on site every day. Grades 2 through 6 is the 2 days learning at school, 2 days interactive learning at home, 1 day asynchronous. When we hit starting at 7-12 now for modified campus, it's 2 days learning at school, 3 days asynchronous learning at home.
I think maybe the discrepancy is just like, maybe that's not what a lot of people had in the spring.
Sure.
Because it was just different.
Right.
So they're
when
like,
we were in fully extended flexible
so
learning.
the expectation was like, well, we're home, we should be seeing those people, but they're teaching.
They're teaching
today.
the other half of the kids in front of them.
Yeah. So that's different, and that's legit, and I think it's all very reasonable, but I think it just felt like more confusing. So I don't know if that is something that, you know, you're going to hear a lot of, maybe need to, you know, clarify.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
That's good.
Yeah.
I would say, I'm not sure if synchronous and asynchronous is necessarily the best way to describe to parents what they should be expecting.
Actually, we have been using different language.
Yeah.
Real
Sorry, that's me.
All right.
Erica helps me use different language for our family and stakeholders, yes.
Well, it sounds like Sarah, especially maybe for the families going from 6 to 7. Because
Yeah.
there is a jump there,
Yeah.
so just.
Right, I agree.
It's not particularly.
And I think a teacher explaining an assignment, just talking about like, hey, this is what you're gonna do today, and just kind of even that introducing and then letting them go work is still awesome. It doesn't have to be a full 45-minute lecture on something, but just that introduction, to see their face, to hear them describe it in their own way,
Yeah.
will feel familiar to them, and I think that would be appreciated as much as possible. I know I would really appreciate that as a parent, to see even like a handful of those videos a day where it's just explaining, and they can record that and send it out, and it doesn't need to be, you know, live explanation, but.
Anybody else? While we wrap this up? Tony, you get any feedback on, how the mask thing go? Everybody did pretty well? Anybody heard?
Yeah, we didn't have any masking concerns or complaints come from the bus, which was great, because we had put in a regional response team protocol to be able to address them for bus safety. We've had just one or two kindergarten concerns come out of North Point with this child not being ready to wear it and practice it, but other than that, it's been so positive. It's been really, really good.
Because that we'll probably get that question eventually, so it's awesome to be able to say, even the first few days was great, so thank you. All right, anybody else? Superintendent's report, it's in there, we're good? Okay. All right, moving on to action items. Thank you to you both for all of them. Acknowledgement of gifts. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is that you, Tony? Sorry.
Yep.
Motion by
Second.
Easter, second by Strobel. To adopt the following resolution, whereas the school board policy 706 establishes guidelines for the acceptance of gifts to the district, and whereas Minnesota statute 465.03 states that a school board may accept a gift of real or personal property by the adoption of a resolution approved by 2/3 of its members, therefore be it resolved that the school board of Springland Park Schools accepts with appreciation the gifts as shown here up on the screen. Thank you. Any discussion? This looks great. Such a supportive community, as always, we're very grateful. Great, Courtney, can you call the roll?
Mr. Strobel?
Yes.
Ms. Bo?
Yeah.
Ms. Wheaton, yes. Ms. Forsberg?
Yeah.
Mr. Kroon?
Yes.
Mr. Easter?
Yes.
Ms. Senate?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to board forum and reports. Anybody have any board forum or reports to share? John?
Yeah, several of us here attended the Zoom meeting for AMSD last Friday. And it was the annual presentation by Morris Leatherman doing their survey of, the status of, I guess, going into an election year, there's a lot related to politics. There's also issues and things, what's most important issues. And so I think education is still kind of front and center in a lot of people's minds. There's even a trend toward thinking that education isn't receiving enough, or at least isn't, trend toward people feeling like education should be getting either as much or more dollars than they're getting right now. So I would encourage you to go out to the AMST website, because that presentation is out there, the slide deck that has all that. There's a ton of questions that they asked, pretty interesting COVID-related questions as well, concerns related to COVID, and just the split, everything split evenly, in terms of whether you think it's an issue, whether you don't think it is, so on and so forth. So pretty fascinating reading, I would say. Just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Anybody else over here? You?
I worked on behalf of the Panther Foundation with the Lions, and we put together backpacks. And I know we handed out 700, and there were, we collected a list, we ran out. So we collected a list, and I know Pete was going to gather those and drop them off at the school. But that was a great experience. We had a we ran in a circle. And we would just fill them up and drop them and fill them up and drop them. And those hardworking lions really made it a lot of fun, both with that, and I made sandwiches with them one day too, with the Panther Foundation, to make up for those days that week where we wouldn't have the school-funded meals. So that was a great opportunity.
Thank you. Marilyn?
Just to add to John's AMSD, they're gonna try a blended meeting of both people on site and Zoom.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be an interesting concept. 916 foundation presentation, and I think the district joins that foundation every year and entitles one of our students to receive some scholarship money. We received the formal retirement statement from the superintendent, so that position is going to need to be filled. We brought 500 Chromebooks. Students have devices at home, but they don't seem to carry them back and forth, so we need some on site as well as those that are at home. And of course, the COVID report. Everybody has their COVID report. I finished the summer seminar, 3 sessions, and I didn't bring my notes. What used to be called fall area meetings, have a different name now. Those are all going to be online, and they're coming up soon.
Yeah, I think they're happening already, the legislative ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
And leadership conference is also going to be a virtual event this year.
Oh, it is.
Yes.
I was wondering, it seemed like a lot to expect to pull it all together in person by January, so.
I mean, I think it's probably equally hard to do it virtually.
I agreed.
But,
Yeah.
you know, those plans and those commitments to the convention center need to be made a long time ahead.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
decision needed to be made.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything else? Michael, Tony, you guys have anything? Okay. Last Thursday was supposed to be the first Centerview PTO meeting, but it was canceled because they aren't allowed to be meeting in the school, although I know like Woodcrest does one virtually. So hopefully some of the PTOs can maybe find another option like that too. But we will stick with the list I sent out earlier since we don't really know what this year's going to look like anyway. So, all right, that's it for board forum. All right, we're going to be moving into closed session when we're going to talk about some employee negotiations, and after that we will have a couple of action items. Can I get a motion to enter into closed session to discuss employee negotiations?
So moved.
Sorry, Amy.
Yes.
Motion by Wheaton,